past year, ICE has become more aggressive, more visible, more politically controversial, and more focused on expanding powerful enforcement and swinging voters. Since 2025, immigration has become one of the most important national issues in the United States. ICE has more than doubled its numbers of officers and agents, expanding its offices across the countries, increasing street arrests and deportation flights, and opens many more detention facilities. Detention numbers have risen extremely, and new laws have expanded who can be detained or removed, including people with little or no criminal record. Because now ICE has more money, staff, detention space, and authority than before, people see it very differently depending on whether they view immigration mainly as a legal issue or a human issue. The return of the Trump-era enforcement priorities has led these tougher immigration policies and a stronger focus on deportation. As a result, ICE raids and removals have received much more media attention than before. At the same time, many local governments have openly resisted ICE actions, creating growing tensions between federal immigration authorities and city leaders. Before we continue, here are a few definitions to better understand our topic. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is a federal agency that enforces immigration and custom laws. Deportation means removing a person who is not a citizen from the United States. Detention is when migrants are held in a facility while waiting for a court hearing or removal. A sanctuary city is a city that limits how much it works with ICE. This matters most because ICE affects immigration policy, local policy, families, workplaces, detention systems, and national policies as well. Since 2025, ICE has no longer just an enforcement policy. It has become a symbol of the larger immigration debate. When Jacob Frey said Minneapolis was under siege by ICE and DHS in a public interview, it showed how much ICE has changed in recent years. ICE is no longer seen as just a federal agency doing enforcement work, but as a symbol in the national debate over immigration, local control, and federal power. Now I will pass it to Jack, who will talk more about the two sides of the story.
Thank you, Maya. What's really interesting about this issue is that people interpret it in complete opposite ways. So from one perspective, ICE is the guardian. It represents law enforcement. It represents law enforcement, national security, and the idea that rules need to be followed. In this view, deportation policy is necessary to maintain order, and the opponent is illegal immigration or even sanctuary cities that refuse to cooperate. But from another perspective, that completely flips. Immigrant families and communities become the ones being protected, and ICE is seen as the threat, an aggressive system that creates fear and disrupts lives. So what we're really seeing is not just a disagreement about policy, it's a disagreement about values. Is it a legal issue or a human issue? And that divide shapes how everyone interprets everything that ICE does. Moreover, through this perspective, the people taking advantage of the system are those that are being endorsed by the current administration, who are being hired by ICE and are using the power they are given to take advantage of multiple vulnerable civilians. Because of this, their own views, their own extra views and opinions. Whereas the people are trying to change the current broken system over protesters and other civilians in the government in other positions of power that are trying to stop this overpowering and take over from ICE. Now, pass it to Diego, who will talk more about our reasoning.
Thank you, Jack. When we look at different sources, we can clearly see how ICE has changed since 2025. The Heritage Foundation supports much stronger immigration enforcement. The report argues that ICE should stop focusing only on criminals and instead deport anyone who is not documented. They also call for more funding, more officers, and larger scale deportation efforts. This shows that ICE is becoming bigger, more powerful, and more focused on expanding enforcement. On the other side, the article by Laura Jadid shows how quickly ICE has expanded its recruitment. She explains that ICE added around 12,000 recruits in 2025 alone, meaning that the agency now has more recruits than experienced officers. She also argues that the hiring process has become rushed and less selective. We also see how ICE has become more visible and controversial at the local level. In his interview, Jacob Frey described Minneapolis as being under siege by ICE and DHS. He said there were thousands of ICE agents in the city, far more than local police officers, and that ICE was stopping people based on their appearance, accents, and race. And if we look at coverage from the Wall Street Journal, we can see how ICE has moved into the national spotlight. It is no longer operating quietly in the background. Instead, it has become one of the most talked about and controversial parts of immigration policy. Now I will pass to Victoria to talk more about the impact of these changes.
This is where we begin to see the real impact of immigration and enforcement. At a certain point, enforcement stops being something abstract and becomes deeply personal. Communities begin living with the fear of raids, families face separation, and people lose jobs, stability, and security. What is especially important is how quickly one action can turn into something much bigger. At this stage, a system can feel overwhelming not only for individuals but entire communities. Suddenly, an entire family is in a crisis. What starts as enforcement becomes an entire chain reaction. A single raid can turn into detention and can lead to loss of income, and income loss can lead to loss of housing. The immigration policy begins to feel like a system of laws and less like a system of laws and more like a system of disruption. Now passing it to Beckett to further explain.
Yeah, so U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency has drastically changed in the past year, making the old and new versions almost unrecognizable. The shift was sparked by the Trump administration's entering office, enacting policy changes and funding reallocation. ICE has not only gotten larger, but has also expanded the scope of its jurisdiction. Their workforce has increased by over 120% due to an increase in funding and policy changes. Now, ICE doesn't just focus on the border, but has shifted more inward and concentrates on neighborhoods and workplaces, and at large arrests have increased over 600%. These major changes have not just brought about more arrests, detention, and violence, but have also brought more controversy and backlash. The agency has shifted from very rarely being talked about or known to being in the center of the spotlight. In the past, ICE has stuck more to its duties and been somewhat confined and restricted in what activities they partake in. But critics would argue that the new ICE, however, hasn't just stepped over the line, but has removed it altogether. ICE isn't just about immigration and customs enforcement anymore, but it's become an agency that instills fear and silences voices of opposition and those trying to speak out. This should raise the question, do United States citizens really have the freedom of speech? Or does the government control what we say through agencies like this one? And is the government abusing its power through ICE, or is it truly just monitoring illegal immigration? Now I'll hand it over to Maya.
Thank you. So going back to our original question, how has ICE changed since 2025? We can now see that it has gone far beyond just removing people. ICE is more aggressive, more visible, and more politically controversial than before. Since 2025, there have been more raids, more detention, more media coverage, and more attention on immigration enforcement across the country. ICE has become more aggressive and less careful. At the same time, local governments have become more vocal in resisting ICE, especially in sanctuary cities. This has created growing tension between city leaders and federal immigration authorities. We have also seen a major shift of how people view ICE. What was once mainly seen as a federal agency enforcing immigration law is now viewed by many as a symbol of a much larger debate over immigration, local control, and federal power. Supporters believe these changes are necessary to restore law and order, discouraging illegal immigration. Critics believe that they create fear in communities, separate families, and give too much power to the federal government. Overall, ICE has become one of the most visible and controversial parts of immigration policy in the United States. And its growth reflects just how divided the country really is. So the question we want to leave you with is, how much power should ICE actually have? And what kind of immigration system should the United States build in the future? Thank you. Any questions?
You all go first, please.
Yeah?
What different system do you think the US should create in your opinion?
So in our opinion, from the readings that we've done in the past, we think that the US should stop focusing more on just removing as many people as possible and hiring as many people as possible that have their own personal views and opinions and are not going through the right process
Sorry.
interviews and anything, because they, like the team ones that don't have the proper interview process, and they should focus more on the illegal side of it and less on just the racism side of it.
You might have already stated it, but I would just like you to restate it, maybe. Like, out of the system of ICE, what are like the main things that you want to like combat against it and like maybe like destroy, so that maybe like the new system could be better?
I would say, if anyone wants to add on as well, that out of the whole concept of ICE, we would say that the views of the people that are becoming law enforcement officers in the ICE department to be less endorsed by the administration currently,